All right, so today we're going to be talking about Emma's case study. Well, if it'll go. Come on. Okay, here we go. Emma's occupational profile is she is going on 5. She is 4 years old. 4 years and 8 months to be exact. She attends a specialized school center for ABA therapy and has weekly OT for her sensory processing and functional skills. Which is related to her self care and preschool readiness. Her history is that she has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and she is adopted and has medical history of exposure to drugs and alcohol in her prenatal time. Her occupational analysis is that she needs to be feeding, dressing, grooming, and toileting herself. She needs help with her play and social. She needs to adjust her ball skills, and she needs to increase her grasp/pinch, her handwriting skills, and her bilateral coordination. Her problem list is pretty lengthy. She needs help grooming, dressing. She has an issue with safety and emergency response. She's not very good with social participation. She struggles with education. She's not like super social with leisure and play. Her functional mobility is not great. Her problem solving and memory need to be increased. Her energy endurance is pretty low. Neuromuscular movement, mobility, coordination, strength, all of that is pretty low. Organization and adaptability. Sensory functions, vision functions, and perception. She needs to work on all of those. Her appropriate milestones for her age with gross motor would be balancing on one foot, hops and skips, catching a ball using both hands, bouncing a ball, and throwing overhand. Her fine motor would be using tools, drawing like elaborate pictures, able to cut straight and curved lines. Sensory motor and play, pretend play, and cooperative play is more evident, so she should be like adapting those skills. Self-care, learning to tie her shoes, dressing herself independently and undressing herself independently, and buttoning and unbuttoning large buttons. Her OT goals. Number 1, Emma should be able to demonstrate the ability to independently fasten and unfasten buttons half the time. Emma should be able to demonstrate the ability to independently connect and complete zipper pull on a jacket 75% of the time. She should demonstrate the ability to accept teeth brushing 50% of the time with parent assistance, and it should be measured by parent report. Emma will brush her hair 75% of the time as measured by parent report. Emma will sit on the toilet at least 3 times a day as part of an initial toileting routine as measured by parent report. Emma will demonstrate the ability to form horizontal, diagonal, and intersecting strokes with tripod grasp half the time while drawing after initial setup. She should cut out large shapes with scissors half the time during therapist-directed activity. She will demonstrate the ability to string beads of varying size, utilizing mature grasp patterns and in-hand manipulation skills 75% of the time. And coming up on the last ones, Emma will demonstrate the ability to catch a ball tossed from her 3 to 4 feet away to her. Emma will demonstrate the ability to catch a ball tossed to her from 3 to 4 feet away at least 50% of the time. She will be able to trace the letter E when it is laid out in front of her at least 50% of the time. And lastly, she will be able to pick up change and stack. Oh, wait, okay. Sorry about that. That is where I should have put some punctuation. Emma will be able to pick up change and stack them in the correct pattern at least half the time. I got confused on my own sentence right there, guys. So, next. So for our first intervention, this will be goals 1, 2, and 11. Relevant materials are button board, Theraputty, beads, and coins of different sizes. For activity number 1, we're going to be using a button board for Emma to practice buttoning and unbuttoning buttons of, that's a mouthful, buttoning and unbuttoning buttons of varying shapes and sizes. This will improve her ability to button her pants and shirts. Activity number 2, we'll be picking beads out of Theraputty to improve pincer grasp and be able to hold a zipper. For activity number 3, we'll be picking up change and stacking each coin on its matching coin, resulting in 1 stack of each coin. So like stacking all the quarters in 1 stack and then all the pennies in 1 stack for different sizes and different texture shapes, because the sides of coins are different. So for the grading of all the activities in intervention 1, activity number 1, we will grade this activity by starting with larger buttons and then working the way down to smaller buttons and eventually using the varying shapes and sizes. To grade activity number 2, we will start by using large beads and work our way to smaller beads, picking them out of the putty and then having her attempt to pick them up with tweezers eventually. And then activity number 3, we will start using the larger coins only, so only quarters, and then work her way down to smaller coins, and then all the coins together, having her pick like all the pennies and putting them together, and then pick all the dimes. That's what we'll do. For intervention number 2, this is goals 3, 4, and 5. Relevant materials are the Nook brush, a doll, and a hairbrush. So for activity number 1, we'll be using a Nook brush with pudding or applesauce, whatever flavor she likes, and then having her go through the motions of brushing her teeth with it. For activity number 2, we will have Emma brush her doll's hair and work her way up to brushing her own hair. The doll will help her see that brushing her hair is not scary and it doesn't hurt if that is her issue. And then activity number 3, we will have Emma sit her doll on a play potty and have her go through the steps of using the potty with the doll before she goes through it herself. And then for grading activity or intervention number 2, activity number 1, we will start by using flavored water, so it's really thin, and then pudding to make it thicker, and then applesauce for texture. Not all at the same time, clearly. To grade activity number 2, we will start by using a wide tooth comb and then a small hairbrush and work her way up to a regular hairbrush. So a wide tooth comb so it's not so pulley on her hair, and then a small hairbrush so it's not so big and scary, and then a regular hairbrush. To grade activity number 3, we will start by having Emma just sit on the potty with her pants on, and then have her sit on the potty without her pants on and work her way up to actually using the potty. So she's just kind of sitting in it like a chair to get used to it. So she'll eventually want to start using it. So for intervention number 3, this is goals 6 and 10. The relevant materials are paper, pencil, whiteboard, and a marker. For activity number 1, we will have Emma play connect the dots on a piece of paper to connect horizontal and diagonal lines. And then activity number 2, we will have Emma trace a capital E on a whiteboard multiple times in a row. Activity number 3, we'll have Emma play connect the dots with a letter E to work on her horizontal lines and writing an E. So basically activity number 3 is putting activity number 1 and 2 together. To grade all of these activities, so activity number 1, we'll start by connecting only 2 dots, so like just drawing a straight line between the dots, and then adding more dots onto the paper for her to connect, and eventually maybe have her connect specific shapes, like maybe work into a square or a star or a triangle, whatever shape that she can connect. Activity number 2, to grade it, we will have her start with writing a large capital E and then work her way down to a normal sized E and then eventually not having to trace it at all. So she would start off tracing a capital E and then a normal sized E like on a regular sheet of paper, and then hopefully having her write it all by herself. And then activity number 3, to grade it, we will start by having multiple dots for each line of the E, so like 3 dots per line, and then only a couple dots, and then eventually no dots, so then she's just, again, drawing an E. For intervention number 4, this is goals 7 and 8. Relevant materials are scissors, cardstock, pen, beads, and pipe cleaners. Activity number 1 of intervention 4, we will be using a piece of cardstock and drawing a large circle on it and have Emma cut it out. We'll continue to do this for multiple shapes. Activity number 2, we will have Emma pick up beads using pincer grasp and string it onto a pipe cleaner and let her keep it as a bracelet. And then activity number 3, we will have Emma outline the previous shape she cut out with beads to improve her pincer grasp. It's like a little arts and crafts moment. For the grading of intervention number 4, we will have Emma start with a larger circle, cutting it out, and then a smaller circle, and eventually get to shapes with corners like squares, stars, triangles, any of that. And then activity number 2, we will start with larger beads to string on the pipe cleaner, and then smaller beads, and maybe work our way up to clear beads to make it more difficult for her visually. Activity number 3, to grade this activity, we will have Emma start with larger beads, outlining them, and then smaller beads, and eventually small rhinestones, because that'll really get her pincer grasp going. For intervention number 5, this is only goal number 9. Our relevant materials are a ball and a hula hoop. Activity number 1, for this activity, we will have Emma toss a hula hoop into the air and try to catch it. Activity number 2, we will toss Emma a kickball from 4 feet apart for her to catch in her hands. And then activity number 3, we will toss Emma a smaller ball from 4 feet apart for her to catch in her hands. The grading of these interventions, activity 1, we will have Emma start by only tossing it a little in the air and catching it, and then higher and trying to catch it with both hands, and work our way up to only catching it with one hand. For activity number 2, we will start only 2 feet apart, then 4, and then 6 for her to catch the ball with both hands. For activity number 3, we will start with a regular ball, and then a textured ball, and then a weighted ball for her to catch in both hands. For our home program, activity number 1, for the first at-home activity, we will have Emma's parents hang a teeth brushing sequencing chart up in the bathroom for Emma to look at and know what order to prepare and brush her teeth in. Also, we'll probably need to have Mom stand by her and read it to her, I figure. Since Emma's only 4, she really probably isn't reading yet. Activity number 2, we will have Emma play dress up either with her parents or her dolls to practice buttoning and zipping her clothing. And then activity number 3, the last at-home activity Emma will complete is making friendship bracelets for her and her mom or her and her friends. She will use beads and place them on a string because that's a bit smaller than a pipe cleaner, so that might be a little more difficult for her, especially since string is kind of flimsy. We will have her mom tie it off for her because it's probably a little too difficult for Emma to try to tie it by herself right now. So that is the end of all of our goals and intervention plans. Let's see. My computer is being a little silly and not letting me go back. There we go. So with intervention 5 on activity 3, I was thinking about a softball, but I don't really know. Thank you for listening to my